here comes the features of Spring Boot. Now, you might ask, what makes Spring Boot really good, or how come it's really good? Coming to the features of the Spring Boot, it can create standalone Spring applications. As I said, you can just generate the jar and use it as a standalone application. You have embedded Tomcat, Jetty, or Undertow directly. No need to deploy the WAR files. Yes. Now, we all know when we created our Spring applications, we used to actually deploy the our Spring applications, if it is a Spring MVC application, into a Tomcat server, and then we used to up the Tomcat server. That means we are going to run the Tomcat server. Isn't it a tedious task? How about like if you had a chance to directly run your application rather than deploying them? And that's how it is possible, especially when you start using Spring Toolsuite, which is one of the beautiful IDEs provided by the Spring. It's the Pivotal team. You have an embedded server. It's a Pivotal server which internally has Tomcat. It's like, just so simple to start your Spring Boot application. I'm going to explain you more about that. Coming to the next one, provide opinionated starter forms to simplify your Maven configuration. Yes, as I've been stating, there are some starter forms in the pom.xml file. We have them, like these are the things which actually start the things. Now, if you're making a Spring MVC project, maybe you need around 5 to 10 dependencies, but for Spring Boot, a single dependency is enough. The reason is they actually combine all those 10 dependencies and make it a starter form, which actually has internally downloads those dependencies as required. So this is some of the beauty of Spring Boot. Now, automatically configure Spring whenever possible. Now, at all possible times, what it tries to do is automatically configure the things. Like, for example, you need to have a component scan or anything in a XML file. Now, this all configuration can be just done by a single annotation, which is @Spring Boot application. Now I'm going to actually reveal the power of that annotation in the coming videos, where you'll come to know more why it is called a Spring Boot can configure itself whenever possible. And especially the properties files of the Spring Boot are very powerful, and they actually do a lot of work in auto configuration. Provide production ready features such as metrics, health checks, and externalized configuration. Now, these are something like an additional point which you get when you buy a product. It's simple. These are the things which are like, oh my god, these are the assets for mine, apart from what the core concepts which it provides. Spring Boot actually gives you the production ready features such as metrics, health checks, and externalized configuration. I'll go in depth into this in the later parts of my videos. And finally, absolutely no code generation and no requirement for XML configuration. Keep one thing clear in this Spring Boot tutorial, that is, you are never going to go with that XML files. Yes, that what you heard is pretty much true. No more XML. We are going to ban them in Spring Boot, and that's how the Spring Boot is. Now, who all were really hating this XML files, you're going to love Spring Boot. Now, I'm going to say, or I'm going to give you a lot of demos showing how a Spring project is created and how you can get rid of the XML configurations and start working smoothly enough on your core business logic. Now, there are few prerequisites apart from knowing what Spring is. There are some software requirements for the Spring Boot. That is, it needs a Java 1.8 version, which is the latest one, and a Maven version of 3.0 plus anything about 3.0, and the Spring framework of 5 snapshot. This is the Spring framework which we require. So these are the prerequisite software for Spring Boot. Okay, once again a similar question, why Spring Boot? If you see, as an end user and at a lower level, now the Spring even became, which was actually a higher level to a lower level because of Spring Boot. So that's what, if you see, as an end user, and Spring Boot stands between the user and the Spring. Now, Spring gives you many functionalities. I just don't need to specify them because it's a well-known thing. Like, data, batches, integration, web, JDBC security. These are all provided by Spring. Now, so what is Spring Boot? As you said, it's just not framework. It's like a rapid application development model for your Spring projects. Like it's like on the top level, if cake is Spring, then icing is Spring Boot. That's how it is. See, like Spring Boot is just making your Spring applications enhanced in the way they can be. So never think Spring Boot is a separate framework, but at its core, Spring Boot is also Spring itself with some bootifying features, I say. Now, so these are the things which are a basic introduction to the Spring Boot. In our next tutorial, we will be learning more about the Spring scripts and how do you and how do you need to start your quick kickstart your first Spring Boot application. At the same time, I'm going to tell you how to install your prerequisite softwares, which most of them know, but just for a quick glance.